Hi, Grandma here reading the Midwife's Apprentice, and we're going to begin chapter 10. Chapter 9, Alyce actually helped deliver a baby, just picking up on little tips that she got from watching Will deliver the twin calves, and just things that she's picked up observing the midwife. After this, when the midwife was summoned to attend a mother, Alyce took to stealing her way inside the woman's cottage, hiding in the shadows so as not to be noticed, watching closely to see what the midwife did and how and why. She took and stored in her brain and her heart what she heard the midwife say and do about babies and birthing and easing pain. She discovered that an eggshell full of the juice of leeks and mallows would make a labor quicker, that rubbing the mother's belly with the blood of a crane can make it easier, that birthwort roots and flowers can strengthen contractions in a reluctant mother. And then if all else fails, the midwife can shout into the birth passage, "Infant, come forward. Christ calls you into the light." She found that mouse ear and willow can help stop bleeding, and that a tea of anise and dill and bitter milkwort would help when milk would not come. She learned that newborn infants are readily seized by fairies unless salt is put in their mouths and their cradles, that a baby born in the morning will never see ghosts, and that a son born after the death of his father will be able to cure fevers. Alyce thought the midwife had more skills with herbs and syrups and spells than Will Russet, but Will delivered babies just as well and was much kinder to the mother. Alyce thought if she needed a midwife, she'd rather someone like Will than Jane Sharp for all her spells and syrups. Early one cold November day, before the pale, watery sun could light up the morning sky, Alyce left the midwife cottage and hurried to the cowshed to see Tansy's twins. Those are the calves, now called Baldred and Bilfrith, after the saintly local hermits, and give them some parsnip tops to munch. There, huddled as close to Tansy as her calves, lay a sleeping boy, blue in his lips, frost in his hair, and tears frozen on his thin, dirty cheeks. Her coming startled him awake, and he jumped to his feet. "I be leaving, mistress," he said. "I took nothing, I hurt nothing, I be going." Alyce grabbed his arm. "Wait, boy, I mean you no harm. Who are you?" "I be nobody, mistress, I go." "Everybody is somebody, and so are you. Want some breakfast?" From the sleeve of her gown, Alyce pulled the parsnip tops meant for the cows and some cheese she had saved for the cat, and fed instead the hungry boy. She watched him as he ate. 6 he was, maybe a little older for all he was so small and thin. He looked a little like her now that she thought about it. A sudden pleasure inside her warmed her hands as she reached out to smooth the boy's hair. "Next time you'd be much warmer, nestled in a dung heap these cold days," she told him. "I know." He finished the cheese, looked up at her. "Bread?" "Bread. I'll go fetch some. You stay here." Alyce ran for the cottage, found a bit of bread she'd hidden away for the cat, ignored the midwife's questions and demands, and started back for the cow's herd. The boy was running down the road toward her, pursued by several much bigger boys, shouting and threatening with their pitchforks and rakes. "Beggar! Thief! Ragtag!" they shouted as the boy crashed right into Alyce and sent them both sprawling to the ground. "Have off, Dick," said Alyce, "or I'll be calling your granny telling your granny who drank that ale she hid for herself. And you, Jack Snaggletooth, I still have that bottle of rat's blood." As the boys backed away, Alyce stood, brushing the mud from her skirt with one hand and holding on to the boy with the other. "Hold off, I said," she repeated, moving toward them. "Corpus bones, beetle, we were but wagging him since you are no sport no more." And the boys moved off to torment someone else until they were found, slapped, and sent to work. When Alyce and the boy, who said his name was Runt, got back to the midwife's cottage, Jane was out seeing to Kate, the weaver's daughter, who was having trouble with her milk. Alyce brought the boy into the yard, cleaned his face with her skirt, and combed the straw from his hair, all the while telling him that Runt might be a good name for a small pig, but never for such a likely-looking boy as he, and that she would help him find a place to sleep and something regular to eat, but he would have to take a real name, for she was not taking anyone anywhere named Runt. "What is your name?" the boy asked. "Alyce," said Alyce. "Then I be Alyce too." "You cannot be Alyce, for it is a name for a girl." "What then is the king's name?" Alyce did not know, so she hid the boy in the chicken house and went about the village asking folks what was the king's name. "Longshanks," said the baker. "Hammer," said Thomas at the bridge. "The devil himself," said Brian Taylor, who was a Scot and so had reason to feel that way. "Just the king is all," said several. "Edward," said the bailiff. "The king's name is Edward." "Edward," said Alyce to the boy. "Then Edward is my name," said Edward, who used to be called Runt. Alyce nodded. She could see the midwife coming in the distance, so Alyce spat on her fingers and rubbed a bit of stubborn dirt off Edward's cheek. "Go," she said, "up that road to the manor. They are hiring boys to help with the threshing. Tell them Jane the midwife sent you, and bid them remember the good job she did delivering Lady Agnes's stubborn son. Now go." Edward shook his head, grabbed a piece of her skirt in his fist, but she put him off, so he straightened his tunic and went, looking back once to throw a brave, shaky grin at Alyce. The returning midwife, angry at Alyce for ignoring her earlier, set her to do all the least pleasant chores: roasting frogs' livers, boiling snails into jelly, stripping the thorns from dogberry roses. But Alyce minded little, for the thought not of her task but of Edward's face and the abundance of bread and cheese up at the manor, looking for a hungry boy's belly to fill. Well, the king is, his official name is Edward, but even if you look him up in Wikipedia, they will give you the nickname, which was Longshanks. And he fought the Scots, so that's why the Scotmen called him the devil himself, because he was the enemy of Scotland. Okay, chapter 11, The Leaving. Alyce was sitting by the fire one cool November morning, tying up birch twigs for a broom, when a pounding came at the door. Jane opened the door to Matthew Blunt, whose mother was about to have another baby and wanted Alyce to come and help. "By the bones of St. Polycarp, who is Alyce?" bellowed the midwife. The boy jerked his head toward Alyce. "Her, your apprentice. My mom said Alyce helped her sister Joan, the bailiff's wife, when no one else could, and so she will have no one but Alyce." "Her? The dung beetle?" The midwife quivered in disbelief. "You are asking for her, who knows nothing and fears to try and does only what little I bid her, and that none too well?" She cracked Alyce on the cheek. "My mom will have no other," repeated the boy. The midwife looked a bit like a mad dog as she spat and sputtered and tried to get words out past all the anger in her mouth. "Go then, Alyce! Such treachery, such thievery! Eating my bread and stealing my mother's. Go!" When she began to throw cooking pots their way, Alyce and the boy lit out and ran all the way to Adam Blunt's cottage. Alyce stood outside for a minute, surprised at having been asked for and not knowing whether to be pleased, until the boy nudged and pushed her to the door. She wiped her hair from her eyes, licked her lips, and went in. The cottage was warm, and Emma Blunt even warmer, what with her efforts to have this baby and be done with it. Alyce rubbed and crooned and fussed as she had with the bailiff's wife. She fed Emma on raspberry leaf tea and comfrey wine. She built up the fire, closed all the windows, and 3 times called the baby forth. Then she sent Matthew to search for birthwort root, put out the fire, and opened all the windows. But the baby would not come. As if he were holding tight to his mother, reluctant to be separate and alone. And Alyce, although able to ease a willing baby into the world, had no idea how to encourage a reluctant one. So as the day passed from morning to midday, and Emma tossed on her tumbled linens, and still there was no sign of a baby, Alyce, doubtful and uncertain without the midwife, or at least Will Russet to tell her what to do, and unwilling to get herself or Emma into trouble, stood back to the bed and said, "I cannot do it." She washed Emma's face, soothed her wet hair, took a deep breath, and sent Matthew back to the cottage for the midwife. Emma and the unborn baby rested from the morning struggle, so all was quiet until the midwife roared in, like wind before rain, blasting everyone out of her way as she set about attending to mother and babe. She insulted and encouraged, pushed and poked, brewed and stewed and remedied. Anointing her hands with cornmeal and oil, she rubbed and kneaded and pulled and tugged and turned the baby from both the inside and the outside until finally he was in a position to come out. Then she slapped Emma's great bulge of a belly, lifted her from behind by the shoulders, and gave her a good shake. All was chaos, noise, heat, blood, and finally over the tumult, Alyce could hear the cries of a baby, the moans of a tired mother, and the laughter of the triumphant midwife. Alyce backed out of the cottage, then turned and ran up the path to the road. She didn't know why or where. Behind her in that cottage was disappointment and failure. The midwife had used no magic. She had delivered that baby with work and skill, not magic spells, and Alyce should have been able to do it, but could not. She had failed. Strange sensations tickled her throat, but she did not cry, for she did not know how, and a heavy weight was on her chest, but she did not moan or wail, for she had never learned to give voice to what was inside her. She knew only to run away. So it was that on a crisp, sunny Martinmas afternoon, while the villagers slaughtered their cattle and pigs for winter's meat, while Maggie Miller stirred sheep's blood pudding for supper, while Will Russet and Dick gathered beech and oak and ash and chestnut for winter fires, why, Alnuth the Saxon cleaned the manor privies and cursed God for making him a peasant and not a lord, while the boy Edward ate a bowl of herring soup and thought of the warm corner of the manor's kitchen that was to be his, while Emma, the bailiff wife's sister, kissed her new son on his tiny red nose and fell asleep with him at her breast while the life of the village went on. Alyce turned her back on all that she knew and that had come to be dear to her and headed up the road from the village to she knew not where, and the cat went with her. So it sounds like she's kind of running away. Why do you think she's doing that? Because she's very much at home in that village and she loves the people, because Jane was going to make her life miserable. That's why when the baby was born, Jane let out a big triumphant laugh. She was basically laughing at Alyce for even trying to be a midwife, and was going to probably beat her because the family had asked for Alyce instead of her. But we'll see in the next coming chapters. Bye-bye.